And good evening. This is the Frankfort Link Live. I'm Michael Monks from the Link NKY global headquarters in downtown Covington for another week, looking at legislation moving through Frankfort and how it impacts you right here in Northern Kentucky. As always, you can follow our content and our coverage of the 2022 Kentucky General Assembly at linknky.com. And also, as always, I'm joined by our Frankfort politics and government reporter, Mark Payne. He is embedded in Frankfort for the duration of the 2022 General Assembly session. Mark Payne, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
Our guest this week to talk about the legislation and other issues surrounding Frankfort and Northern Kentucky are State Representative Ed Massey, a Republican from Hebron. Representative Massey, thank you for being with us. And don't forget to unmute yourself. It's okay. We'll get this thing going here soon.
Thank you very much for having me.
Our pleasure to have you, Representative. And Northern Kentucky Chamber of Commerce President and CEO, Brent Cooper. Brent, a pleasure to have you as always.
Thanks, Michael. It's great to be here.
And while we typically jump right into reviewing legislation that has been moving through the halls of the Capitol over recent days, I think it's probably important tonight that we acknowledge something far more significant, arguably, happening many miles from here, and that is the Russian invasion of Ukraine, certainly top of mind for a lot of us as we grow increasingly concerned about what the end game might be and how this might all unfold. Of course, Russia invaded Ukraine in recent hours, and there have been global leaders tightening sanctions against Russia. And we've heard a lot of commentary about what all this means and what it could mean. But what does it mean for us right here? Could it mean higher gas prices? Could it mean a further escalation of conflict? And Representative Massey, I'll start with you as a lawmaker from Boone County in Frankfort. Sanctions on Russia is not on your immediate agenda, but can you give us an idea of how a global conflict like this can ultimately impact us here?
Well, it certainly can. In fact, today, when the president was addressing the nation, we actually delayed going into our start of session so that our members could watch that presentation. We all are concerned about inflation continuing to rise, the impact on fuel prices. We don't know yet what that extent of that is going to be. I had the fortune today to be with Senator McConnell at another event. He was asked several questions about this. He commented that it was unknown at this time. We are where we are, but we certainly need to respond to this in an appropriate manner. I completely agree with that. I think his words were well chosen, and he was very wise in his approach. He said we needed to employ every sanction available because we needed to show that America, which may be perceived as weak in some fronts, is not weak. And in fact, we will come to the aid and defense of our NATO allies if need be. Of course, Ukraine's not a NATO country. So we had a pretty interesting discussion about all of those things today. And it was very humbling because it makes the things that we do, while important, just seem more insignificant, I guess you could say, when people, are losing their homes, that are suffering, even though there may seem like it's a world away. We have to appreciate the freedoms that we really enjoy here in America. But we certainly, I believe, we're going to be impacted by some of this.
Did you get a sense from Senator McConnell, Representative Massey, that this might be something that federal lawmakers could work together on? It seems virtually impossible to bring any type of bipartisanship in the halls of Congress these days. Could potential foreign conflict of this magnitude be that?
He seemed to indicate that they had already had some discussions, at least informal discussions. He indicated that he had approved the way that the president was approaching this up to this point, that, troops have been dispersed to Poland, et cetera, but there would be no ground war that involved United States troops in Ukraine. I think that was also said by the president today. But I think there's a united front that we have to have a significant response. This kind of action has not been experienced in Europe since World War II. And so it's very important for us as a national superpower to respond in an appropriate manner. He did indicate, and I agree with him, that the reason we're probably in this dilemma is because Putin would like to rebuild the empire that was once Russia that broke apart. And he is set on doing that. And that we might be perceived as having a little bit of weakness because we pulled out of Afghanistan and we're tired from the war fought over there. And so the combination of those things might bring us to where we are today, but we are where we are, and that we need to be strong with our allies moving forward, and that we need to help Ukraine any way we politically can, or that we can through arms, etc., without involving troops or putting troops at risk on the ground in Ukraine.
State Representative Ed Massey, Republican of Hebron. We're also joined by the Northern Kentucky Chamber of Commerce President and CEO, Brent Cooper. And I suppose, Brent, you could address this on a couple of fronts locally, because you do represent business interest here in the Northern Kentucky region, and you have business interests of your own. You are the owner of C Forward, an IT firm here in Covington, just a couple of blocks away from our world headquarters on Madison Avenue. So we know that Russia has engaged in cyber warfare for some time. This is, of course, something that could result in more human casualties. So first, let's start with the business side of things. What type of concerns do you expect your members to be having when a crisis like this emerges?
Yeah, it's on top of a level of unpredictability that we've been experiencing the last couple of years. We just, supply chain, we do, Representative Massey just talked about inflation. Those are related to the workforce issues, which were related to the pandemic. This creates another level of instability. And I don't know if you saw the stock market today, but it's a roller coaster. And that comes from unpredictability. And I always say businesses overarching want things to be fair, simple, and predictable. And this causes a level of unpredictability in all those areas for us. And so, yeah, it's something we're all concerned about, closely watching. You mentioned the IT front. We feel like we've been under attack from Russia for years. It's common knowledge within the IT world. And if you talk to Gabby Batshon at Global Business in Newport, you talk to Dave Hatter, the mayor of Fort Wright. These are IT guys that I'm friends with, Brian Rushman at C4. These guys will tell you that we get hit from Russia every day. And I've spoken with people at the FBI and the Secret Service, and it's pretty common knowledge. They believe the bad actors are state-sponsored from Russia. So when you get those ransomware attacks, that's a lot of times where we feel it's coming from. And every small business I know is concerned about that. It hits their insurance costs, it hits their daily lives. And so this is something I will tell you, people who are saying that Putin and Russia are friends of ours, I don't feel that way at all. I feel like we're under attack all the time. And I don't understand some of the public comments, to be honest. And so hopefully we will, as Representative Massey said, align with our allies and find ways to remedy the situation, because we feel like we're under attack all the time.
You are watching the Frankfort Link live here from Link NKY. I'm Michael Monks, and Mark Payne is our state politics and government reporter based in Frankfort for the duration of the Kentucky General Assembly. And of course, if you read linknky.com, as we hope that you do frequently, you know that, the things we covered are the Covington City Commission meeting, the Campbell County Fiscal Court meeting. We're covering the 35th District basketball tournament. And so something like Russia invading Ukraine is a bit outside of our comfort zone, but we did want to acknowledge this here at the top, since it is top of mind for all of us just as citizens of the world. But of course, that doesn't mean that news here locally has stopped. It certainly hasn't in Frankfort. And the purpose of this program is to talk specifically about how what's going on in Frankfort impacts us right here in Northern Kentucky. It was another very busy week. And Mark, I will ask you for a quick recap of what you've been seeing. We saw a very busy day today, in fact.
Yeah, today might have been the busiest day of the entire General Assembly session. Of course, I say that every week, but there was a lot that went through today. The Senate passed Senate Bill 138, which deals with some of the opponents of 138 kind of say it's an anti-critical race theory bill, but it was written by Senator Max Wise from Campbellsville, and it deals with classroom instruction. Next, the Senate passed Senate Joint Resolution 150, which will put an end to the COVID state of emergency in Kentucky. And it's a pretty big deal because the General Assembly just voted to extend it last month. And now, so this joint resolution is saying that they want to get rid of it by March 7th. And then Senator Chris McDaniel introduced and passed a bill out of the Senate Appropriations and Revenue Committee today that would potentially give rebates to Kentuckians, and that will have a huge effect on Northern Kentuckians as well.
Of course, Chris McDaniel, Republican senator of Taylor Mill here in Kenton County. And based on your reporting, Mark, details of that rebate is that it is designed to combat inflation, whereas we had perhaps grown familiar over the past couple of years of receiving some sort of government assistance to help us battle the economic challenges brought on by the pandemic. This is to combat the inflation, which I've heard it argued was brought on by some of that money that was designed to help us during the pandemic. So this rebate proposed by Senator McDaniel is designed to combat inflation. Kentucky residents will potentially receive rebates from their previous tax year, so not the 2021 tax year. Single resident rebates of up to $500. Joint filers could get up to $1,000. And refunds would be received by the end of the summer if the bill is passed and then signed into law. It is expected to cost more than $1 billion and leave roughly $1 billion left in the general fund for the year. Senator McDaniel said across the Commonwealth and across the nation, there's a pretty big problem right now. He goes on to say the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported recently that our inflation rate is at a 40-year high of 7.5%. For the average family, that means their costs for their households, not changing anything, will go up roughly $267 per month just for the essentials. Representative Massey, your thoughts on the senator's bill?
Well, I think that both chambers are very interested in what we would refer to as a tax reform model. We think that we want to find ways to give back to our constituents. And I think the Senate has rolled out their version. I think you'll see something forthcoming from the House in the near future that may be a different take on how we go about that. But at the same time, I think the goal, though, is that while we've been able to navigate some of these waters pretty successfully with our revenues, that we want to see how we can return it to the taxpayers. And I think that's very important. I think they expect that from us. When we had a retreat earlier this year before session began, one of the number one goals of the at least House Republican caucus was to have some form of tax reform. Obviously, we have been very budgetary minded this year, getting our budget out of the House. I believe it was January 20, which was historical because we got it out before the governor even did his address. We feel like that was a very solid budget. It's kind of back on regular track now because I don't really think the Senate's going to talk about the budget much until March. But I certainly think this tax reform discussion, I should say, kind of plays into that. So we are going to be working on that diligently. I'm not a member of the A&R committee, but I'm very close acquaintances with the chairman, Representative Petrie, who held the judiciary seat before he became chair of A&R. So I'm very familiar with the work they are doing. And I know that leadership, I believe, is meeting with Senate leadership tomorrow. And so I'm sure they'll be discussing the very things that you've just raised between the Senate rollout and what is the anticipated rollout of I won't say a contrary or opposing bill, but a different idea from the House Republicans. So that's coming, I believe. I think the common denominator, though, is that we want to help our taxpayers. We understand inflation is off the charts right now. We understand that gas prices are the highest we've experienced in many years. We know that workforce investment is critical. I think we're sixth in the nation as far as highest number of people not working, in the sense that I think 52% of adult-aged Kentuckians that could work are working, but that leaves 48% that are not. And that's a problem. And businesses are having a hard time finding employees, which affects their ability to do and function in the economy. the supply being slow is huge on every scale. I came from the school world, and when you have the volatility in supplies that you have today in that market, trying to budget for a new school facility or a building, and then not getting your paperwork responses as quickly as you need to can result in huge dollar factors when it comes to trying to plan those budgets. In fact, I heard of one case based over time that a school district actually cost them upwards of $10 million on a project. So when you have that kind of volatility that is going on right now, I think people are going to look for leadership. They're going to look for some consistency, and they're going to look for some answers. And we, of course, we constantly hear from our Northern Kentucky area folks, we don't want any higher taxes. Their gas tax has been an issue. My colleague, Representative Santoro, had filed a gas tax in the past to try to accommodate some of the roads. We had the Brent Spence Bridge issue. And so there's so many things going on that impact not only Kentuckians, but in this conversation, certainly Northern Kentuckians. And I think that we're trying to move with a deliberate speed, knowing that we're more than halfway through the session. It is really ramping up. We've got over 500 bills filed in the House. And I believe there's a large number, I want to say upwards of 300 or so bills filed in the Senate. I don't know the exact count as of today, but we are working on that very diligently. So circling back around to the point of the question, I think that tax reform is something we all want. We want to change some of the structures that we've become accustomed to because, frankly, now that we have a supermajority in the House and the Senate, we just believe there's a better way of doing things. And so we're going to work with our business community. We're going to work with our chambers and try to make sure we can accommodate that for the Kentuckians that we serve.
And Representative, we're going to talk a bit about a piece of legislation you co-sponsored that I read about this week from Mark Payne's coverage, related, I believe, to lowering the age of eligible employees who want to work in the service industry. So we'll come back around to that momentarily. Brent Cooper is the president and CEO of the Northern Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. Obviously, inflation, a big concern for the business community as well. But then again, so was receiving that money during the American Rescue Plan, and prior to that, the first piece of federal legislation that came out. So, I think we're dealing with the repercussions of the aid that came out, and now trying to find an answer on that.
I'll tell you, Michael, from my perspective, and I always say perspective comes from where you're sitting, but had the CARES Act not happened, I believe this country would have gone into a Great Depression. And if you talk to most business and civic leaders, I think they agree with that. I think it was critical to keep our economy going and keep us afloat. I will tell you the number one overarching issue is workforce. That does stem from the pandemic. Pre-pandemic, and I'll just give you some examples. Pre-pandemic, if you go back 10 years ago, 58% of high school students were working in some sort of hospitality or industry in the Northern Kentucky economy. It's dropped now down to 38%. That's data straight out from Janet Harrod, NKU. I know we just talked about the workforce participation rate in Northern Kentucky. Our workforce participation rate is 67%. It's 10 points higher than the state, 5 points higher than the national average. But excluding 5 areas in Kentucky, Northern Kentucky, Jefferson, Fayette County, so Louisville, Lexington, Bowling Green, Owensboro, outside of those areas, workforce participation rate is 39%. And so we've got to find a way to help our state, help lift everyone up. We also got to find a way to employ people here. We've got a ton of job openings, and there isn't, most of the businesses that we talk to, that's what they're struggling to find. So one of the bills we're excited about is House Bill 499. This is the child care solution. We think that is one of the solutions. Again, an issue coming out of the pandemic. We had a child care issue pre-pandemic. It got worse during the pandemic. And this bill would allow employers to pay employees, give them a benefit for childcare, and the state would match that dollar per dollar. So if a business gave somebody $500 for childcare, the state would give $500. And so that is something we're really excited about. We think that is part of the solution. We think work-based learning, those kinds of solutions in our schools are good. We're big on talent attraction. We've got to start bringing people here, and we've got to market our state and tell our story. And as was mentioned, transportation, that's another one that we're really big on here in Northern Kentucky, because we know what kind of situation we've lived through the last couple of years when the Brent Spence was shut down or limited to 2 lanes, and the damage that did to the Roebling and the 4th Street Bridge and all the traffic on 275 we experienced. So those are things that we're encouraging Frankfort to take a hard look at. As far as the bills that were introduced today, look, I trust Senator McDaniel, and more dollars that come back to Northern Kentucky. When that happens, that's good for our economy. And the mission of the chamber is to grow the Northern Kentucky economy. So, we think that's a good thing. I actually think the House and Senate have done a really good job being stewards of our dollars in a very conservative way. This is why we have such a big surplus and are able to do those kinds of things. So certainly encouraging on those fronts as well.
And I will say,
oh, yeah,
I just wanted to say that I'm happy to be a primary co-sponsor on House Bill 499. That bill was filed by Representative Heverin. And we do think that this will be allow some family members, especially women, to return to work. It would be a help to them in a very difficult time. Certainly, we believe that this would stimulate our economy, and it's something that we can partner on. So it's important because that particular bill is not just a partisan bill. It is signed off by many folks on both sides of the aisle, and a belief that we can develop a system that will allow us to fill some of those vacancies that Brent has talked about.
Okay, so Brent, when I look at the, and I'll come back to you in just a moment, Mark, I'm sorry. When I look at the unemployment rate for our 3 counties in Northern Kentucky, Boone, Kenton, and Campbell, we're among the lowest in the state. So are you seeing something that conflicts with that when you talk about the workforce participation rate? I don't think that's as common a term. Are people not working? Because it looks like while there are a lot of job opportunities, there aren't a lot of workers, not because of laziness or lack of desire to work. They're employed.
Yeah, well, it's a little deceptive. I mean, the workforce participation rate, for example, includes seniors in high school. It includes seniors who are often already retired, as an example. And the unemployment rate, if you've dropped out of the workforce, you don't get included in that. And so this is where it gets a little tricky. I will tell you, you're right, though. There are a ton of job openings, and everybody is struggling. And that is why we really believe part of our strategy has to be bringing people to Northern Kentucky specifically, sure, but the state as a whole. And I don't think we have a talent attraction strategy right now. And that's something we've been encouraging House and Senate and the governor's office to remedy. We've got to find a way to tell our story. And everybody's heard of the Pure Michigan campaign, and Nashville has a show named after it, for Pete's sake. Let's find a way to tell our story and bring people here. We have a high quality of life and a low cost of living. And as you know, a wonderful place. We just got to find a way to market that better, and as a state, really start bringing people here.
Well, we did manage to attract Mark Payne back to his hometown, and he's here with us. For sure. We've shipped him off to Frankfort. Mark, you wanted to say something moments ago.
Yeah, Representative Massey, I've heard, so this session so far, I've heard from both sides, from the Democrats and the Republicans. They're both kind of taking credit for how, the windfalls and how well the economy is doing in the state. But I'm curious how much of this money is coming from the CARES Act and from ARPA funds.
A lot of it's coming from there. In fact, we had a meeting with Senator McConnell a few weeks ago as a caucus, and I really enjoyed his comment. It was kind of funny, but at the same time, it was very, very pointed. And that is, in his opinion, you probably shouldn't have gotten all the money that you did, but spend it wisely. And I think that we are trying to manage that difficult task of making sure it is spent wisely and not on things that are recurring issues, because obviously that money is not going to be coming back around in the future. So how do we invest that money into things that are going to promote the economy, that are going to promote work, that are going to promote the betterment of Kentucky, promote healthcare, promote opportunity? So it's obviously been it's always, partisan when you get into bills and debates, because this person wants this pot of money for this and somebody wants a pot of money for this. But at the end of the day, I think that we have worked fairly well together to try to establish a plan for how these monies would be used going forward, because we're not going to always have them. The other thing is in the past, Kentucky it was more of a cash in, cash out, and we didn't really have surplus. And for the first time, based on not only the CARES Act and the money that's been given to us from the federal government, but because of revenues in Kentucky, we're at a more comfortable place from a budget standpoint, which goes back to the tax reform piece that we're trying to accommodate for our constituents. So it is a delicate matter in that sense. When you got money, everybody wants to tell you how to spend it. I think the House, at least, has been very reserved. We've kept money back in reserve for that very reason. And we're trying to now figure out how we could return some of that to our Kentuckians. It's a challenging task. It is. We're in waters we've never been in before. You got to remember also that the last two budgets that we've passed have been single year budgets. And now this year we're back to doing a biennial budget where it'll be for a 2-year period. And we're trying to make sure that we do it right. To use a phrase coined by our speaker on a lot of issues, you only get one time to really do it right. And we want to make sure we do it right. So we're going to continue to work with the leaders in the community, the chambers, the workforce groups, the Senate and the House leadership. And a lot of times, what people don't realize a lot of times about Frankfort is there may be some high things that are volatile that you disagree on. But a lot of the underlying things, which make up the majority of what we have to do on a day-to-day basis, most parties, for the most part, generally agree. But there's a lot of rhetoric that's spewed out there, especially on those high-profile items. So we're continuing to work it together. I think that you'll like what the House presents as well. And, of course, it's going to end up in free conference committee, and then they'll have to work out the budget for an ultimate approval. So that's kind of where we are at this point.
Okay, well, I'm not going to tell you how to spend your money, but I will tell you how to spend your time. And it's going to be with this beauty right here. This is the Link Reader. It is our new print edition, and it is coming to every residential mailbox in Boone, Kenton, and Campbell counties on Monday, February 28th. So be on the lookout for that. We've got a lot of cool stories in here, and we'll be bringing this to you every couple of months. And if you're interested in advertising in this thing, you should look us up. Sales information at linknky.com. And if you have story ideas, tip us off at news@linknky.com. Also want to tell you about the Kentucky Side podcast. You can find that online at linknky.com inside our podcast tab, where we have in-depth conversations about issues facing our region and also some fun conversations about Northern Kentucky. Brent knows I like to poke fun at Northern Kentucky while he's doing his song and dance for the region. So if you click on that, you'll hear this week's episode where we do explore the return of the scourge of meth in Northern Kentucky. I talked to law enforcement officials about their deep concerns, and you won't believe how much meth they're finding in Northern Kentucky. So go to linknky.com and click on podcasts and take a listen to the Kentucky Side. A new episode comes out every Tuesday. And you are watching the Frankfort Link Live. I'm Michael Monks in downtown Covington, joined by Mark Payne, Link NKY politics and government reporter, also State Representative Ed Massey, the Republican from Hebron, and Northern Kentucky Chamber of Commerce President and CEO Brent Cooper. Representative Massey, very quickly, I wanted to talk about that legislation about lowering the age, I guess, to be a server, perhaps. Could you explain it to our viewers?
Yeah, that was a bill brought by Representative Killian Timoney. And basically, it was to lower the age of someone that's able to serve alcohol. And part of the reason for that, obviously, is to help those businesses that are somewhat floundering, reaching for employees, et cetera. They may not be of age as far as Kentucky law goes to drink, but we're not talking about drinking. We're talking about serving a product. And even some of the businesses, what came to mind, and I learned it a couple of weeks ago, is that even Cracker Barrel today in our local community is serving alcohol. And so trying to find an adequate amount of servers to keep these businesses open and prosperous and turning a good profit is important to our community. And so that was the purpose of the bill. We talk about it all the time. If you're 18, you can enter the service, you can carry a firearm, you can do a lot of things. There's really no reason we don't think, or it shouldn't be preclusive, that we keep them from working in those types of environments because of that. This actually was a bill I think may have been filed early on by Representative Richard White, who had some health issues during this session and has not been able to be on the floor for the past couple of weeks. But he's in that business, in that service industry business, and he had personally experienced that. So we heard debate and testimony about that, and it has cleared committee and has cleared the floor. So we're hoping that the Senate will soon hear that. And again, you eat, my dad always taught me, eat an elephant one bite at a time. So we're taking swipes in every way we can to help the economy. And of course, that's in concert. We work with these groups because their lobbyists are down here meeting with us and explaining what will help their various clients, our constituents. So we believe that's a good bill, and we're looking forward. I certainly voted in favor of that, and we're looking forward to the Senate hopefully taking that up and bringing it to conclusion.
Brent, I'm wondering, what has the business community learned over the past couple of years as workers seem to have more power than they're used to having in this country? And that's because they have choices, and you are seeing businesses have to pivot, have to offer more money. We do believe in competition in this country, and that is what we're seeing. Isn't a lot of this related to pay? Restaurants aren't known exactly for paying very well.
I think pay is part of it. I mean, one of the programs that we've been pushing, or initiatives really at the Northern Kentucky Chamber and with throughout the region, is Grow NKY, growing regional outcomes through workforce. It's over 75 partners talking about workforce related issues, everything from early childhood, K through 12, through adult learning, through talent attraction I mentioned. And the last one is business policies and practices. And that gets to your question specifically, because we need to make businesses better businesses. Again, our mission is to grow the economy. So we actually want people to make more money. But it's more than that. It's quality of life. And, we talked about the bridge just a second ago. If it takes you an hour to get to work, it takes you 2 hours to get your kid to the dentist or the doctor. That's not a high quality of life that we want here. That's not what we want for our families. This all ties together, and businesses have to adjust schedules. They have to pay people more, for sure. There's childcare. There's all kinds of benefits that businesses can do to be creative and help have employees be happy in the work that they're doing. And so this is some of the conversations that we're having, and we're trying to get businesses to be creative. And we've seen businesses pay for bus passes, pay for transportation, pay for childcare. And so salaries might not go up, but you might have a higher quality of life and all kinds of benefits that in essence make up the difference in salary. So it depends on the industry. It depends on the business, for sure. And we are seeing wages go up on a pretty broad basis here. That is part of the inflation. It is part of the issues that we're seeing. But I think businesses can be creative, for sure. I will say, in the logistics area, nationwide, I heard $90,000 trucker, or 90,000 people trucking shortage. We saw that at the docks, getting things unloaded. It used to be $3,000 to unload a shipping container in, let's say, New York or LA. That spiked to $25,000, from $3,000 to $25,000 in a very short amount of time. And that has a downward spiral on all the other logistics issues that come through this area. So we are a logistics site, and a lot of our businesses are related to that, advanced manufacturing and so forth. So, but our businesses have to find ways to compete, as you said, and the chamber and other organizations through Grow NKY are here to help them do exactly that.
And we did see the announcement today of TQL, Total Quality Logistics, expanding its Boone County operations, as well as in Louisville and Lexington. And we know all too well that Legion Logistics is doing well at Newport on the Levee, and produced our CEO, Lacey Starling, who is now running Link Media, the owner of Link NKY. So yes. And Mark, I want to go back to the conversation about ending the state of emergency related to COVID-19 and some of the things that you might have heard on the floor of the General Assembly today, because politicians talking about the pandemic was often different than credible health officials talking about the pandemic. Right now, it feels like this thing is fizzling out finally after 2 very long years. I think even I'm a little lax about wearing a mask where I used to feel like I needed to wear a mask. So maybe this thing is over. But talk about ending the state of emergency and what you heard on the floor of the General Assembly today from some Republican lawmakers. What was their position?
Yeah, I think that everyone's tired of it, Michael. And politicians, in the state house want to put an end to the state of emergency. But there's a few things at play, certainly. And some of it's definitely politically motivated, with the governor coming out last week and saying that he is going to, he's supporting a sales tax decrease, which is against what Republicans want, as far as, possibly increasing the sales tax and getting rid of an income tax. And he also issued an executive order that put a freeze on vehicle tax. And then, like I mentioned earlier, the General Assembly just voted last month that they wanted to extend the state of emergency until April 14th, which is the day before the last day of the General Assembly. And so some of the argument this week has been, well, if we keep this state of emergency in place until April 14th, and we go on leave when the General Assembly is over, and the governor starts issuing executive orders, well, we can't do anything because we're not in session anymore. And unless the governor calls us back into session, there's nothing we can do. And so that was some of their concern when the pandemic started and the governor's issuing executive orders. People were asking representatives and senators, hey, how can the governor do this? Why is he doing this? But they couldn't do anything about it. And so that's some of what I heard over the past few days. And since this has passed out of committee, I know that the governor's office has issued a statement saying, hey, this pandemic is still going on. People were tired of it, but even within the numbers getting better, it's still going on. We still need to be cautious. One of the other concerns is that it could affect federal dollars, and perhaps Representative Massey could speak to this a little bit more. But that was some of the concern I heard is, if we get rid of the state of emergency, are we still going to be able to claim all these federal dollars that we've been claiming?
So the reason it was extended is because we had a special session. Obviously, that was part of the reason we were brought back, was to deal with the Omicron variant and all of the things that are dealing. And it was an uphill battle. We didn't know when that was going to end, when the next variant may come along, et cetera. And I think you're right. There is some political jostling going on about when to end the emergency, et cetera, because we can only act presently when we're in session. That makes it particularly challenging on our end. And it's no secret, I've said it many times in my own capacity, that there's not a lot of communication presently between the executive office and the General Assembly, which makes things very, very difficult. And I'm not sure why that's the case. I think we're ready to engage in that, but we just haven't had those conversations. So I think that we're all trying to move forward. There is a constitutional amendment on the ballot for this coming election cycle that would allow us to call ourselves back into session in an emergent circumstance, so we could react. One of the complaints we heard all through last summer was, why don't you do something? And the response was simple: we cannot act unless we're in session. And so when we came back in, we took some efforts, we believe, to curb what we thought was an overreach of the executive branch. And there's been that pushing and shoving going on back and forth. And now I think that there was a bill that's been introduced in the House, and it's not been called onto the floor yet, but it talks about allowing parents to decide whether they should allow their children to wear masks when sending their kids back to school. And so I think that's indicative, though, that there's a group of folks, at least, that believe that might be an appropriate action, because we are tired of COVID. We are tired of dealing with this, and there's two different groups, and so there's that pushing and shoving going on. And of course, then there's the concern on some of us, and me included, that, well, the problem is we gave that authority locally back to the local control, and in that case, mask back to school boards, to allow them to make what they believed was the best decision in their community, because they're boots on the ground in their community. And then you did that at the heat of the battle. So do you really want to take that authority away? And what if another variant comes along? And then we can't call ourselves back into session. And where does the governor act in that regard? So there is a lot of movement going back and forth. But at the end of the day, I think the consensus of the caucus is we are so tired of talking about COVID. We want to get back to the business that serves Kentucky. We want to deal with the economy issues. We want to deal with roads. We want to deal with restorative justice. We want to deal with all of those things that we believe are very important to Kentuckians. And so I think you'll see some of that wrangling going on in the next few weeks as things develop. And a lot of people are trying to get their political foot up because we have an election season upon us, and several people are opposed. And then we also have what's going to be, I think, a very incredible gubernatorial race in a year. There's a lot of rumor about who's going to run and who's not on the Republican side. And of course, we know that Governor Beshear is going to attempt to get a second term. So I think that a lot of this is both things. I think it's tired of COVID, and there's just some political wrangling going on to see where we can be at the end of this session.
You said exciting candidates. Who are you hearing, Representative?
Well, I'm hearing all kinds of people. I've heard everything from Kelly Craft to Ryan Quarles to Savannah Maddox to Senator Alvarado to Senator Wise. And I think we're all kind of excited to see what is this going to be. It's a strange animal for the first time in a long time in Kentucky when you have a 75-member body or 100-member body in the House. 75 are Republican, 25 are Democrat. If things go as expected, we might pick up more seats. In the Senate, I believe it's 30 Republicans and 8 Democrats. And then yet we have a Democrat that is in the executive office. So there's a lot of pushing and pulling going on. It's just a different environment than certainly this caucus has somewhat been used to. And I wasn't ever in the minority, but in talking with my colleagues, it wasn't that long ago that the Republicans were in the minority in the House. So things are changing. The political climate's changing. And that's normal, I believe. That's cyclical over time in history. But I just think there's different outcomes associated with that. And so I think you're going to have a pretty robust election cycle this year, and you'll have a pretty robust gubernatorial race.
We'll be looking forward to that. I read in Bloomberg just this week that they analyzed the top performing state economies over the past year and how they've rebounded from the original impact of COVID. And Kentucky was tied for 7th. Now, they only looked at states with more than 2 million people in them, which eliminated a few. But Kentucky was tied for 7th as the best performing economy. And Brent, we do see Governor Beshear, who, as Representative Massey noted, is running for re-election next year. He's got a business record to run on, it looks like.
And I look at the Chamber of Commerce, we are nonpartisan, we are issues based. And I will make this comment about COVID and the governor's response. Good health is good business. And I think part of our job at the Chamber is to tell the story of some of our small businesses, some of the business community who don't normally get that opportunity. So let me share this with you. Last November, going back to 3-4 months ago now, we had this one business who had 9 cases of COVID. Went to December, they had 15. January, they had over 60. That's how quickly Omicron ravaged through our community. So you can say you're tired of it all you want, and I'm tired of it, believe me, but it impacted us. It impacted our economy in a profound way. And those representatives and leaders who have been championing vaccine, God bless them. That's what we needed. We need more people to take the vaccine, and we need more people to get their booster when that opportunity comes out. We need to listen to our health officials and listen to our doctors. And I don't know a single doctor in Northern Kentucky was saying you really shouldn't get a vaccine. I mean, everybody was saying that. And the people that didn't, a lot of them paid the ultimate price. But from an economy, we all paid this price. And so masks and vaccine were a good thing, in my opinion, and were necessary for the economy to continue. And going forward, there will be another outbreak. There will be another issue. I don't know when. I hope it doesn't come for a very, very long time. But we have to have things set up in our community where we listen to health officials and we act accordingly. If we don't, that's bad business. And that one story is just a perfect example. I mean, think of all the people, think of that business that was short 60 people and their sick time and all the impact that had on their ability to provide services and goods to their customers. If you look at that from the big picture, it was just devastating. So I just wanted to share that with you. I believe that there are leaders on both sides of the aisle, Senator McConnell, Stivers, our Senator McDaniel are just some quick examples in addition to the governor who are championing vaccines and good common health measures. And that's what we need more of these days.
And I would concur with that, Brent. In fact, I will tell you that I'm very pro-vaccine. I'm not pro-mandate. And that's been one of the battles that you've seen even fought out in the legislative halls, is that, you know, my position is, how can you say that I'm not for mandates, but then want to mandate to employers how they can handle their business? That's really not been something that Republicans have done. So it's been interesting because it's really brought up issues that we didn't anticipate we were going to have to face. And that's even within the caucus at times. So I think Brent's right. I think we have to learn to be adaptable and flexible, but we want to protect our people too. I mean, you know, I had a relative, a very close relative that I lost to COVID. And he was the kind of person, he didn't want to take the vaccine, and I respect his decision not to. But at the same time, I wish he was still with us today. So, you know, I think it's a delicate, difficult matter, and people become very passionate about it. And I couldn't agree more with Brent when you say, look, it really comes down to personal choice, but see your doctor, trust your physician. We trust them on other matters. Why would we not trust them with this?
Has that been a challenge at all, Representative Massey, in your caucus? Because there certainly are elected officials who have been skeptical of the virus itself, and certainly some of the medical responses to it, like the vaccine opportunities. Has that been challenging for Republicans like you, who accept that COVID was a threat and that the vaccines were an appropriate answer to it?
It has. I mean, you know, over the summer and even into the caucus time, once we get into session, I still get inundated with emails about vaccine mandates. And to be candid, I tell them there's not mandates. And they're like, well, the employer's making us get a vaccine. And I'm like, well, there's no mandates. That's your employer's decision. And I really can't intrude upon an employer's right on how they run their company, because there's consequences. If you mandate a vaccine and your people leave and you don't have employees, there's a consequence. If you mandate a vaccine and, you know, some people just refuse and you have to terminate them, there is a consequence. Every choice has a consequence. And I think the idea is, who's right and who's wrong? I don't know that we know who's right and who's wrong when it comes to COVID, but I think as a caucus, the general opinion of the Republican Party has been, look, we believe in personal choice. We don't believe in government enforced mandates, but we also, as a body, don't want to push our employers to do things. We wanted to stay free from them because we believe in the employment world and believe in promoting the economy. And, you know, how do you tell somebody at a hospital that they can't mandate a vaccine when they have nurses and doctors that may go into a very difficult unit where people are sick in ICU? What if somebody then, you know, basically transmits that disease and you have a breakout in your wing and those people die? So it's very hard. It's a hard discussion about personal choice.
All right, in our last few minutes together, I want to talk about bridges. Mark Payne, are we hearing anything about bridges up here in the halls of the General Assembly? I feel like we have to explore this issue every single year. And I've been told that this might be the year that something finally happens on the Brent Spence Bridge front, whatever that might possibly mean or look like. Have those words been uttered?
Yeah, I think we've heard about the Brent Spence Bridge for a very long time and from a lot of different politicians, but it sounds like it's as close as it's ever going to be. I know that the last that I heard, the House budget, the transportation portion of it will include some money, but they are waiting on word from the federal government. So there's a lot in play in terms of, you know, how much is the federal government going to match, you know, what Kentucky puts forward. And Representative Massey can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that they're waiting on the House budget the House budget's in the Senate right now, but some of it is waiting on how much the federal government's going to match. And so I think that they're waiting there. That's where it's stuck right now.
And I think that's fair. And I will tell you that what a lot of people think is when the transportation package passed Congress, they think that money can just be divvied out to build a bridge. And that's just not true. There's a matching element to that. And there's competition that goes to that matching element with other states. Now, true, Brent Spence Bridge is a high priority matter. It's in the top 5, I believe, in the nation. We are working feverishly to make sure we get that project accomplished, but we do have to look to the general fund to some degree to get the matching dollars that are necessary in order to make that project a reality. And I will tell you that there are some of our members that have worked day and night on this, including my colleague that I mentioned earlier, Sal Santoro. We actually are roommates down here while we're in session. And so I get to hear some of the ongoings of that stuff. And I believe there may be some announcements in the very near future. I believe that this is truly a bipartisan issue. In Northern Kentucky, that is just a choke point. And then you worry about traffic being diverted into Covington, which is detrimental to their production and their economy during the daytime hours. You know, the footprint of the bridge, where's that going to be and how does that impact the city? We certainly don't want to harm one of our bigger cities. But I think we can all agree that that is such a corridor for this side of America. In fact, you know, all of these Amazon buildings and these storage facilities that are in the central heart of the United States depend on those avenues in order to move their products. And so it is very important to us. We don't want to have tolls. I'll tell you the consensus of our caucus for sure is that we are absolutely not wanting tolls. We do not want to put that down on our taxpayers and our constituents. That was probably something that was said in the last gubernatorial election that was very detrimental to our Republican candidate, because in just a few days prior to the election, he mentioned the fact that there may have to be tolls, and we certainly don't want to have tolls. We want to work with Ohio. We want to work with the congressional members in Ohio and Kentucky, and we want to make this project a reality. So I know that that's been a big issue for the chamber, and Brent has worked diligently on that. And so we are going to continue to push as hard as we can push to make that a reality. It's not just important to Northern Kentucky either, because that is a corridor from basically Michigan to Florida that supplies so much of the eastern United States and the Midwest with product. And so it's essential that we actually widen that choke point in order to make sure that we can have safety and that we can have product being able to be delivered.
And Brent, I know you've probably got something to say about this. You certainly have for the past several years. And rather than offering just an open-ended opportunity for you, I'm curious what we learned about traffic around that bridge over the past couple of years, because obviously we all remember the fiery crash that shut it down and the impact that had. Of course, it was in the midst of a pandemic, so it wasn't being used quite as much, but some of us were still out there driving every day. And I think we learned that some of the other arteries are very quickly choke points themselves. The Roebling Bridge had been shut down a couple of times. It's still shut down. I'd like some answers on why it's still shut down. I'm growing quite suspicious about that particular bridge and its future. The Clay Wade Bailey Bridge and its intersection with 4th Street in Covington is an absolute nightmare. The old 4th Street Bridge between Covington and Newport, and the Taylor Southgate Bridge, all of these areas were just very difficult to navigate. And are you hopeful that the answer, whatever it might be, to the Brent Spence Bridge as a choke point that sort of feeds all of that, will address all of those concerns without damaging historic neighborhoods and that sort of thing?
No, I absolutely am. And we're lockstep on the concerns about the scope of the bridge, the mitigation issues that Covington's expressed. You know, we're lockstep with Covington on those concerns, and we're actively advocating to address those concerns. I will tell you, if you're somebody that lives in Alexandria or Highland Heights or Cold Spring or Fort Thomas or even Newport, Bellevue and so forth, you might not have thought about the Brent Spence on a daily basis. I assure you, when it was shut down, you sure did. And that's why we've been telling people this is a regional issue. I spoke to the city of Florence and I said, look, it was 2 hours, December of 2020, to get from Fort Thomas to Florence during holiday shopping season. This is why you should care about this issue. And the reason I know that is because it was my daughters that were stuck in traffic on a Saturday trying to get some Christmas shopping done. So it is absolutely a regional issue. We are hopeful those issues will get addressed. As soon as the federal government gets that application process done, ODOT, Ohio Department of Transportation, KYTC, they will jointly apply. And kudos to our judges exec, Pendry, Moore, Knockelman. Shout out to Senator McDaniel, South Santoro. As Representative Massey said, all of these folks are engaged, actively working on it. We've never been this optimistic that we will get a bridge. I'm very hopeful. And daggone it, I expected at this point, after everything we've gone through, we have already paid the toll. And what I told people 8 years ago was the reason we were okay with $1 toll or reasonable toll was because we didn't see a path forward to getting it built by 2020. You know how I was right? Because 2020 came and went, we didn't have a bridge. So we're hopeful now that we've already paid the toll, we can get this done without tolls for Northern Kentuckians, and we get this thing built once and for all. We've had every elected leader that we know, from the President of the United States to the Governor of Kentucky to the head of the House and the Senate, tell us that we can make this happen. So we're anxiously awaiting the good news later this year.
Well, we shall see. I've got about 90 seconds left. Mark, let me give 30 seconds to you. What are you looking forward to next week? What should we be keeping an eye on?
So we should be keeping an eye on the Senate. I did hear some rumblings today that their portion of the budget should be coming out in the next 7 to 10 days. I know that Senator Chris McDaniel, who chairs the Appropriations and Revenue Committee over there, has been really busy going through the House and the governor's budget. So that's something that we should be getting some more clarity on in the future.
And Representative Massey, since I ask all of you that come on, can we mark you down as a yes for legalized cannabis in Kentucky?
Well, that's been a really big debate. I was asked by a member today to call it into judiciary. I've got to talk to leadership and see where that's at. One of the things that's always been difficult about that particular issue is the energy that's utilized to get it through committee and get it through the House if the Senate is not going to hear it. We've got it through the chamber before, and then the Senate just didn't hear it. So we are trying to work out those wrinkles. That debate is still hotly contested, especially in many rural parts of Kentucky. So stay tuned on that. I was asked this very evening to request the bill. We'll see where it goes.
All right. If it doesn't pass, I guess we'll have to use that bill paper to, never mind.
What I want to do is put it all into a road fund and call it Operation Pothole, but nobody.
Oh, I like it. You would have my endorsement. All right, Brent, legislation you're paying attention to that's not related to the bridge.
Yeah, no worries. Tax reform, any of the workforce bills, like I said, childcare and so forth. We'd like to see a life sciences lab in Covington. Hashtag just saying. We've got a number of chamber members in that space, CTI, gravity diagnostics, Spexion, and so forth. It would be the largest investment outside of the convention center since the 90s that wasn't school related. And I will just say this, when Northern Kentuckians agree on things, they generally get it. That's how we got the College of Informatics and the Health Innovation Center and things like that. Let's get a health sciences lab. Let's get a new bridge. Let's get some investment in Northern Kentucky. I think our caucus can come together on those issues and make those things happen.
That's Brent Cooper, President and CEO of the Northern Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. We've also been joined by State Representative Ed Massey, Republican of Hebron, and Link NKY politics and government reporter Mark Payne. I'm Michael Monks. You've been watching the Frankfort Link Live. Follow us online on wherever you do your social media thing, and always on our website, up to the minute headlines at linknky.com. Brent, Representative Massey, Mark, thanks to all of you for joining us. And thanks to all of you for watching. We'll be back again next week with another Frankfort Link Live. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening, everyone.
Yep. Take care. Thanks, guys.